Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to Water Wednesday. My name is Kathy Schultz. I am the Water Education Specialist with the California Department of Water Resources. The mission of the Department of Water Resources is to sustainably manage the water resources of California in cooperation with other agencies to benefit the state's people and protect, restore, and enhance the natural and human environments. This month for Water Wednesday, we are looking at issues of access and equity in regards to water. Last week, we were joined by Samantha Bishop from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, and she discussed some of the equity issues around access to clean water and some of the ways that U.S. EPA helps ensure that the water that comes to your homes is safe. If you missed her presentation, it is available on our YouTube channel. This week, our speaker is Jordi Vasquez, an environmental scientist and climate change mitigation specialist with DWR. Jordi is based in our Fresno office, where in addition to working on climate change mitigation, he also sits on DWR's Human Right to Water Working Group. California passed its groundbreaking Human Right to Water law back in 2012. And in a nutshell, this law states that every human being has the right to safe, clean, affordable, and accessible water adequate for human consumption, cooking, and sanitary purposes. And we all learned back in, probably elementary school, how important water is, how we all need water. We need to drink it. We need it to grow the crops that we eat. And this past year has really driven home how important it is to have for sanitary purposes, not just showering, but washing our hands on a regular basis. And so the Human Right to Water identifies that this is something that everybody needs and has a right to, and also calls on agencies, including DWR, to make this happen. So in just a few moments, I'm going to turn things over to Jordi, who can tell you a bit more about the Human Right to Water and how DWR and some of our partners are working together to make it a reality. Really quick, before Jordi gets started, I just want to go over a few things about Zoom in case anyone's joining us for the first time. We did ask that you turn off your cameras and your microphones and request that you do keep those off. It just helps reduce any background noise or distractions that might filter through. We do want to hear from you, however, so if you look down at the bottom of your screen, take your mouse and hover over your screen, and you'll see that a little line of icons pops up down at the bottom. And right there in the middle is a little speech bubble with the word chat under it. And you can send your questions to me as Jordi speaks or after his presentation, and we will get to as many of those as we can. We also have a captioning service available. We have a live captioner who is typing as fast as she can as I'm talking here. And so if you want to turn the captions on or off, just take your mouse, move over a little bit to the right from that chat box. You'll see another rectangle with the letters CC under it, and that controls your closed captions. And that pretty much covers what I've got to share with you all today. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from Jordi and learning more about the human right to water. So thank you so much for joining us today, Jordi.
Thank you, Kathy. And let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, I hope it's now visible.
It is visible, so I'm going to leave it to you.
All righty, great. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining today, just to learn a little bit more about the human right to water, what it means for our state, and what it means for our Department of Water Resources. I'm hoping this presentation will be informative on the background of human right to water, and also to raise awareness about what it is and how it impacts our fellow Californians. So diving in. As Kathy had mentioned, she gave the definition of what the human right to water, or as it's also sometimes known as, abbreviated HR 2W. It is this policy for the state that every human being has a right to safe, clean, and affordable and accessible water adequate for human consumption, cooking, and sanitary purposes. So to put this idea in context, just stop for a moment and think personally about how important water is to you. And then also, do you know anyone who doesn't have access to safe, secure, or affordable drinking water? For some of our fellow Californians, these questions are a consideration every day. So with a little bit of that background Kathy provided, in 2012, the state legislature passed Assembly Bill 685, which established this human right. And it was signed into law by then Governor Jerry Brown, as you can see in the image. In codifying this right in the Water Code, California became the first state in the nation to recognize this human fundamental right to safe, secure water. And for 1 million Californians, yes, 1 million Californians, this lack of access to water is a day-to-day reality, and why this policy is such an important priority for the state. So as we work to implement this human right, what are some of the challenges we're facing? And before diving into these, it's important to remember that this is a challenge for both public and private water users, whether they are a small community water system or they're solely dependent on a private well on their property, for example. So as you could see in this Venn diagram here, there are about 3 big ones that we are working to address as a state. There's water quality, water accessibility, and water affordability. So water quality has been impacted over the years from byproducts of human activities, whether that's agriculture, oil and gas extraction, or other industrial processes. Additionally, there can be issues arising from the lack of wastewater treatment or perhaps inadequate wastewater treatment that can pollute the environment and water sources. You can imagine septic tanks in some of these more rural areas. If there's an issue there, it can quite quickly contaminate a groundwater or surface water source. And then, just reflecting, of course, how our state is geologically and geographically diverse as ours, there are some naturally occurring contaminants as well, such as arsenic, iron, and manganese. I always have a trouble with that word, even though I study geology. And then, of course, we have the issue of water accessibility. Is there an adequate water supply? Or are there infrastructure challenges in distributing water to, say, homes through a water system? Or is there even infrastructure in the first place to tap into a water source or to treat it? So these are some of the challenges around water accessibility. And then finally, water affordability. Monthly utility bills can be a significant portion of income depending on local poverty and income levels. And going back to the pandemic, as we've seen with the economic downturn resulting from this has been even more of a challenge for some Californians and something that the government has been trying to address with utility billing. So in light of all these challenges, what are some of the recent updates? Well, for one, Senate Bill 200 passed in 2019, and this established something called the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund. So between now, or even back from 2019 onwards until 2030, millions of dollars will be allocated to supporting local communities and folks on the ground who are being impacted by this lack of access to this human right to water. So as you can see here on this screenshot, the State Water Resources Control Board is the primary agency managing these recent funds, and they're working to develop short-term and long-term solutions with this funding as time goes on. And what about Department of Water Resources? Well, the original legislation specifically addressed our department that it must consider the human right to water in all aspects of its work. And it's something we've been working on for quite some time. If you think about it, with the creation of the State Water Project, SWP, DWR owns and operates that system, and it was built in part to provide affordable, resilient, and reliant water supply to California. In more recent times, for example, we have the California Water Plan. This is a comprehensive layout of California's water future, and in 2013, they came out with this summary report on the number of Californians without access to safe water and sanitation. And then in other work we complete on a day-to-day basis, such as drought planning and Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, known as SIGMA, which regulates groundwater. As we implement SIGMA and we complete drought planning, for example, there's certainly a HR2W component in that work. Since we work with our underrepresented communities in the planning and decision process, involving them in those conversations. And you could see this figure here. This figure was taken in our last drought. And this is the city of East Porterville, which is right here in the southern San Joaquin Valley. As our groundwater supply continued to lower, the residents were depending on bottled water being trucked in on pallets, and some really remarkable images that kind of highlighted the drought at the time. So DWR worked alongside other state agencies and local community stakeholders to connect them with an infrastructure tie-in to the city of Porterville. As you could see in this image, that's kind of what's going on there. And that ensured that residents of East Porterville had a safe, secure water supply source again. And just to kind of highlight this kind of work, as we're going into another dry period here in California, we're going to continue to have these, DWR will continue to do these activities to support local decision-making through data. And that's data gathering and monitoring. So we can determine where there are areas Californians might be lacking in access to water. So this screenshot here is of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Data Viewer tool. And it's pretty comprehensive. If you go through the map, it shows groundwater levels, for example, areas of contamination, also dry wells. And I kind of wanted to highlight this one in recent days as we have more drought declarations. This dry well reporting tool and component is going to be really important. And we're encouraging Californians to go ahead and report issues they might be having with their well, so we can understand where there are issues and support their getting them access to water once again. And so what comes next? So thinking for tomorrow, future conditions are probably going to be even more challenging under the impacts of climate change. So DWR is going to continue to work on HR2W, but it's also going to be expanding its role and recommitting itself to delivering on that. I'm excited about this slide because this is some recent ongoing work that DWR has been doing around human right to water. So about less than a year ago, the director of DWR, Director Carla Namath, put together a working group focused on this issue. And during that time, we've conducted some internal and external interviews, developed some recommendations, and even formalized a department policy focused on human right to water. And so this screenshot that you see here is actually from our department's administrative manual, which is where this policy is codified now in our mission statement and activities, and just really highlights that we're formalizing our commitment to this work. Additionally, we've developed recommendations and recommended actions for short-term and long-term solutions to addressing human right to water at DWR. And like the rest of the nation, we've recognized this need to ensure diversity, equity, and inclusion in this planning process. So this has been everything from working with the Capital Collaborative on Race and Equity and utilizing parts of our Racial Equity Action Plan to really make sure that we're having an equitable solution when we're addressing human right to water. And these recommendations do recognize the fact that there has been historical injustices around this issue and the lack of human right to water affecting Blacks, Indigenous, and people of color communities. And so looking forward, California is a resilient state. It has experienced water challenges in the past and will continue to do so in the future. That's just part of living in the Golden State, right? But DWR is going to continue to work on human right to water. And over the next few weeks, I'd invite you all to keep an eye out for an op-ed piece that will be coming out in the Fresno Bee that our director put together. And it lays out our commitment to increasing local collaboration, including more community input in these processes, and just really publicly reaffirms our department's efforts to ensure our fellow Californians have access to safe, accessible, and affordable drinking water. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions or comments related to this presentation, and thank you for this opportunity to present today.
Great, thanks, Jordy. Can I start off by asking, and I know you're probably not an expert on all 50 states in the nation, but is California the only state to have a law like this, explicitly stating that there is a human right to water?
We were the first state in the nation to adopt it. And in recent days, I would like to confirm this, but I believe West Virginia or one of those states actually has been either considering adopting a similar law or in fact, it passed this law. But we were the first. Yeah. So but slowly but surely, it's becoming an increasing issue for people across the nation and the world.
Yeah, yeah, we've certainly seen a lot of that in the news recently. And I forget, did you say how many people in California don't have access to clean water?
1 million Californians are impacted by this issue.
That's a lot of people. Why is this? Why do some people in California have clean, accessible water and some don't?
Yeah, it's a variety of reasons. As I mentioned, the geographic differences of California. There are some areas of the state where they're solely dependent on groundwater, and if there's not an accessible supply, that can be an issue for them. Then, of course, the naturally occurring contaminants such as arsenic, that could be an impact on their water supply source. So there's several different issues around that. And then, of course, some smaller communities maybe don't have as much funding and support for local water issues versus a city like mine, the city of Fresno, where we can have a large tax base to pay for water supply and utilities. So a variety of issues. But yeah, as you can see, it's quite widespread in terms of the geography of the state. If we have 1 million people spread out through the state impacted by this.
Mm-hmm. So the 1 million people, they're not even concentrated in one area.
Yeah. Here in the Central Valley, we're often kind of considered as like the poster child of this issue, but it can be far ranging across the state in areas as diverse as the high desert country. And even if we want to consider too, there are pockets within urban centers where the affordability might be an issue for them and human right to water. So it's very widespread.
We just had a question come in that we're looking at, one of our viewers is saying that she's heard that due to drought, we may have approximately 20% of the groundwater wells go dry. Is that something that you've heard?
That's not something I've heard, but it's as I said earlier, the state is definitely wanting to hear report outs on dry wells.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned earlier SGMA, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, that was passed and became a law during the height of one of the most severe droughts we've seen in hundreds of years in California's history, climate history. So actions like SGMA are intended to prevent those kinds of incidents, but it's certainly something that the state wants to hear about if there's issues with dry wells. But no, I haven't heard that exact number or figure, but it just highlights again the need to conserve and why groundwater management is so important.
So in addition to SGMA, there was the project in East Porterville that was in response to groundwater wells going dry, correct?
Yes, yeah, they had issues with groundwater issues there in East Porterville, and a solution was to tie them into the city of Porterville. And yeah.
So kind of diversifying our water sources might be another way of
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Since you work on climate change as well as the human right to water, can you speak a little bit more about what impact climate change has had and how it might make water accessibility a bigger problem?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, our most recent drought and even the drought we're going into now has been highlighted by the fact that these warming temperatures are really something we've never really experienced in our California water history. If we look back to the drought of 76 and 77, conditions were dry, but they didn't have the heat we have now. And that really kind of amplifies these drought impacts we're experiencing, and obviously is a struggle to implement human right to water going forward if we have prolonged drought years and more water demands, both by people, by the environment, and other needs. So just as climate change is amplifying these extremes we're seeing with drought or flood, it also impacts human right to water for sure.
When I was walking in to do this with you today, I was looking at a new graphic that had been developed showing the increase in temperature normals the new report that came out just last week.
Mhm.
There's an interactive map that you can see how the temperature has gone up in the 20th century, and it was quite impressive.
Yeah.
So to put it one way.
Yeah.
Um, why are you so passionate about the human right to water? How did you get involved with this program?
I was part of this. It was like a professional working group of water professionals, and part of our group project was the human right to water. And so it was an interesting experience because you got to work with folks outside the water world. It's a whole different group of stakeholders and people with different opinions and insights than you would normally have in, say, a water world solely. So it was really interesting to get their perspectives and understand the issue and the impact it's having. And through that, the director Namath actually had seen that presentation and was excited to hear that this was something that, once again, for example, Senate Bill 200, it was back as a priority for the state. And so I was lucky enough to be interviewed and then start working as part of this DWR working group to implement human right to water and DWR activities. So it's been quite the experience to come full circle and to be able to work on this issue now.
That's great. And you mentioned at the very beginning when you were trying to pronounce manganese, right?
Manganese, yes. There we
Manganese
go. I got
is
it.
a hard one to pronounce. You said you were a geology major. Can you talk a little bit more about your background and how you got involved with that?
Yeah. So I studied earth sciences, geology to be exact, at UC Santa Cruz. And my first internship was with the San Francisco Water Department at the height of this drought. And I was working on climate change issues. And then I had the awesome opportunity to join the team here at DWR. So it's been quite the cool experience. And geologists kind of look at the world a little different than other folks, perhaps.
You
So
do.
it's we're pretty nerdy, but it's a great way to really see all the issues, all the sides of an issue like climate change and water. So
Great. So I think you addressed this, but there's a question: Are people in big cities also at risk of not having access to clean, accessible, or affordable water?
yeah, I mean, the city of Fresno is the fifth largest in the state of California, and even here there are pockets where groundwater wells, they're not fully out of compliance, but they do have some contaminants in them, either from past agriculture or industrial activities. In parts of rural, inner city LA, it's also an issue. So I just kind of really wanted to highlight in the presentation, it's often thought of as the layout behind you, your background, as a Central Valley kind of issue, but it also impacts people in urban centers, whether it's the quality, accessibility, or the affordability.
Right. How do people know if their water is clean? Can you tell if your water is contaminated by just like pouring it out of the tap and looking at it in your glass?
It's, I mean, there would be maybe some exceptions if it came out brown or really had a strong smell that something wrong, but that's why in the water sector they have annual water quality reports that members of the public can analyze and read through and understand. They're called MCLs, maximum contaminant levels, to
Mhm.
see what's in their water and if it needs treatment, additional treatment.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
believe if you want to find out where if you want to find the report for your community, our speaker last week shared the website where you can go to do that. So you can go back to our YouTube channel, and the link should be available there if anybody watching today missed that presentation and wants to check the quality of their water.
Yeah. And they send them in the mail every year. So
Oh,
you can check them out.
I'll have
Yeah.
to start opening my mail. Let me see if there's anything else in here that I didn't get to. Um, that looks like we got to everybody's questions, which is pretty unusual. We don't always do that. So Jordy, how much longer are you going to be working on the human right to water and with the working group? Is this something that's going to be ongoing, or are you kind of wrapping up and it'll go into a new phase?
This is an exciting moment because we're just starting to have, the recommendations, the new policy accepted, and the op-ed that will be coming out soon. So, I think this is an exciting moment going forward. So we'll see where this working group continues. We'll certainly be continuing to work on this issue, and we'll see where we can take it further within the department.
And you mentioned that this is a department-wide working group, but are you working with other departments or other agencies?
Yes, I mean, this is a multifaceted, multi-state agencies. I mean, we have the California EPA, the State Water Resources Control Board. I mean, there are numerous agencies and departments that are involved in working on this issue and addressing it. The working group I had mentioned is something that DWR is doing, so we can internalize it and its aspects in our work. But always working closely with our sister agencies and departments on this.
And are there local agencies that you're working with this on as well, or are there local agencies working on this on their own?
East Porterville is kind of a good example of how the state will often work closely with local communities on these issues to address them. So DWR is always here for technical or funding assistance with locals on their water issues.
That's perfect. That leads into this question. Would you be a good contact if somebody wanted to learn more about this, or is there a general email for the working group?
I might say to reach out to the SIGMO office, but I'm happy to forward any correspondence onwards. Certainly, if you want to reach out to me, I can try to connect you with the perfect person for this kind of work and questions. Yeah.
Awesome. So Jordy's email, it's basically his name, jordy.vasquez@water.ca.gov. And if you can't remember that, you can always reach me through a really easy to remember one, which is education@water.ca.gov. And
that's the easier one.
that is the easier one. Last question, Jordy. If people want to get involved with helping the 1 million people get the water they need, what can an individual do?
I think the one that comes to my mind first and foremost is just awareness that this is an issue and this is something that's impacting our fellow Californians. And to tie into that, making conservation a way of life ensures that we have adequate water supply for everyone, and we can support communities in need when it comes to the time if they don't have access to groundwater. The state's moving quickly on this. It's a high priority for the current administration. So just being aware and tracking its progress and what's being done, I think, is huge.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, when I go out and work with school kids, I always tell them that there's always more demand for water than we have available. So we all need to share.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Jordy, for joining us today. And thank you to everybody who joined us from home, or possibly you're back in your office. To learn more about DWR, you can always visit our website, water.ca.gov. And if you have children or you work with them, you're a teacher or a scout leader, or maybe a summer camp instructor, aunt or an uncle, however, we have our water education materials available to all Californians for free at water.ca.gov/education-materials. And to find out more about the California's human right to water, there's a couple of great websites you can visit. The water boards, state water boards, have a website. They actually have two websites. And then OEHA, which is the Office of Environmental Health
Hazards, and I'm blanking on the A. But yes, they're the Office of Environmental Health and Hazards for public health and issues around that.
All right, great. They're also housed under California EPA. So those are some great websites if you'd like to learn more about the human right to water. And like Jordy said, keep an eye out for an op-ed coming soon. Lastly, if you'd like to know more about what DWR is doing or find out when our next Water Wednesdays are, please do follow us on social media. We're on Facebook at CADWR, Instagram, Twitter. Like I said, we've got our YouTube channel. We actually have all of our previous Water Wednesday recordings there, as well as a lot of other videos put together by our incredibly talented video team. And we will be back next week with David Todd, who is from our Water Use and Efficiency branch. And David will be talking about drought and how it can impact different communities in California. So we hope you're able to join us again next week. Thanks again for being here today, and have a great week. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.